The clock ticked. Each second a hammer blow against the dam of her discontent. It wasn't a frantic, desperate ticking but a steady, insistent rhythm, a constant reminder of time slipping away, unlived, unfulfilled. 4:17 p.m. The sterile fluorescent lights of the Harrison and Vance law firm cast a sickly pallor on the otherwise impressive mahogany desk. Grace's hand, adorned with a tasteful but lately oppressive diamond ring, rested on a stack of meticulously organized files. But even the order couldn't quell the chaos brewing within her. Around her neck, a delicate gold chain, a gift from Mark on their 10th anniversary, felt less like a token of love and more like a gilded shackle, subtly restricting her breath. The coffee, lukewarm and bitter from sitting too long, mirrored the acrid taste of her current existence. A carefully constructed life, a masterpiece of expectations fulfilled, yet utterly lacking in the vibrant hues of her own desires. Outside, the city roared, a cacophony of ambition, a relentless drone of traffic and the hurried footsteps of people chasing dreams that weren't hers. The symphony of success, playing at full volume, only amplified the quiet desperation resonating within her. She felt like a character in a play she hadn't auditioned for, reciting lines she hadn't written, wearing a costume that didn't fit. Today felt particularly heavy. Not unbearable, not yet, just profoundly off. Like a note perpetually played slightly out of tune, a dissonance that subtly undermined the entire melody. The air in her office felt thick, stagnant, trapping her in a loop of obligation and quiet resignation. It was a life meticulously crafted, a masterpiece of expectations fulfilled. Loving husband, 2 beautiful children, a successful career as a partner in a prestigious law firm. But somewhere along the way, the artist had lost herself in the painting, disappearing behind layers of societal expectations and self-imposed limitations. Grace navigated the Thanksgiving chaos like a seasoned diplomat in a war zone, a practiced smile plastered on her face, a placating word for every potential landmine. Her mother, Eleanor Sr., named ironically for the boss who now made her life so difficult, followed her every move with a critical gaze that could curdle milk. It was a silent commentary on Grace's choices, her weight, always a point of contention, her hair, never quite done enough, her husband, successful but not quite successful enough. The air hung thick with unspoken judgments, family histories tangled like the overly sweet cranberry sauce congealing in the crystal bowl on the sideboard. The centerpiece, a towering arrangement of faux autumn leaves and plastic pumpkins, felt symbolic of the artificiality of it all. She felt the familiar weight of should pressing down on her, a crushing weight she had carried since childhood. She should be thinner, should be more successful, should be a better wife, should be a more attentive daughter. The list was endless, a constant litany of inadequacy whispered in her ear. This was the symphony of her life, conducted by everyone but her. Her mother's passive-aggressive comments about her workload, her sister's thinly veiled envy of her perfect life, her father's well-meaning but ultimately patronizing advice. It all swirled around her, a suffocating fog of expectation. She glanced at her grandfather, Henry, sitting quietly in the corner, a gentle smile gracing his lips. He winked, a silent acknowledgement of her predicament. He knew. He always knew. He squeezed her hand when no one was looking, a fleeting moment of connection in the sea of obligation. It was a lifeline, a reminder that someone somewhere saw her, the real her, beyond the layers of should. He saw her struggle and seemed to feel it with her. He'd always had a way of doing that. Later, after dinner, as she was washing dishes, her mother cornered her in the kitchen. "Grace, darling," she said, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness that always set Grace's teeth on edge. "You look tired. Are you sure you're not working too hard? Mark needs you, you know. And the children." She trailed off, her implication clear. Grace was neglecting her family in pursuit of her career. Grace took a deep breath, steeling herself against the familiar onslaught. "I'm fine, Mom," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Everything is fine." But the lie tasted like ashes in her mouth. Grace navigated the Thanksgiving chaos like a seasoned diplomat in a war zone, a practiced smile plastered on her face, a placating word for every potential landmine. Her mother, Eleanor Sr., named ironically for the boss who now made her life so difficult, followed her every move with a critical gaze that could curdle milk. It was a silent commentary on Grace's choices, her weight, always a point of contention, her hair, never quite done enough, her husband, successful but not quite successful enough. The air hung thick with unspoken judgments, family histories tangled like the overly sweet cranberry sauce congealing in the crystal bowl on the sideboard. The centerpiece, a towering arrangement of faux autumn leaves and plastic pumpkins, felt symbolic of the artificiality of it all. She felt the familiar weight of should pressing down on her, a crushing weight she had carried since childhood. She should be thinner, should be more successful, should be a better wife, should be a more attentive daughter. The list was endless, a constant litany of inadequacy whispered in her ear. This was the symphony of her life, conducted by everyone but her. Her mother's passive-aggressive comments about her workload, her sister's thinly veiled envy of her perfect life, her father's well-meaning but ultimately patronizing advice. It all swirled around her, a suffocating fog of expectation. She glanced at her grandfather, Henry, sitting quietly in the corner, a gentle smile gracing his lips. He winked, a silent acknowledgement of her predicament. He knew. He always knew. He squeezed her hand when no one was looking, a fleeting moment of connection in the sea of obligation. It was a lifeline, a reminder that someone somewhere saw her, the real her, beyond the layers of should. He saw her struggle and seemed to feel it with her. He'd always had a way of doing that. Later, after dinner, as she was washing dishes, her mother cornered her in the kitchen. "Grace, darling," she said, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness that always set Grace's teeth on edge. "You look tired. Are you sure you're not working too hard? Mark needs you, you know. And the children." She trailed off, her implication clear. Grace was neglecting her family in pursuit of her career. Grace took a deep breath, steeling herself against the familiar onslaught. "I'm fine, Mom," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Everything is fine." But the lie tasted like ashes in her mouth. The silence in her bedroom was deafening, a thick, suffocating blanket that amplified the loneliness gnawing at her soul. Mark, her husband of 20 years, was already asleep, his breathing heavy and rhythmic, a familiar sound that offered little comfort. Grace lay awake, staring at the ceiling, a kaleidoscope of anxieties swirling in her mind. The kids' college fund, her mother's failing health, Eleanor's relentless pressure at work, the mortgage, the endless cycle of responsibilities that seemed to stretch out before her like a barren wasteland. But beneath it all, a deeper unease gnawed at her, a sense of something missing, something vital. Was this it? Was this all there was? A life meticulously planned, perfectly executed, yet utterly devoid of joy? A comfortable existence, yes, but at what cost? She longed for something more, something real, something that resonated with her soul, something that made her feel alive. But she didn't even know what that something was. The weight of years of suppressed desires pressed down on her, a crushing weight she could no longer ignore. She thought about the dreams she had abandoned, the passions she had sacrificed, the person she had buried beneath layers of obligation and expectation. She thought about the girl who had loved to write, who had dreamed of becoming a novelist, who had felt the world brimming with possibility. Where had that girl gone? When had she traded her dreams for a life of quiet compromise? She rose from the bed, unable to bear the suffocating silence any longer. She walked into the kitchen, the cool tile floor sending a shiver through her. She made herself a cup of hot chocolate, the sweet, comforting aroma offering a momentary respite from the turmoil within. But the warmth didn't reach her soul. As an afterthought, she added a splash of Bailey's Irish cream, a small act of rebellion, a tiny crack in the perfectly polished facade. One splash became 2, then 3. It was the first act of defiance in a very long time, a whispered protest against the life she had been living. The reading of the will was a formality, a legal dance performed with polite indifference, a necessary step in the process of settling her grandfather's estate. Her mother and sister sat beside her, their faces etched with polite boredom, their minds clearly elsewhere. But when her grandfather's lawyer, a kindly old man with a twinkle in his eye, announced that Grace was the sole inheritor of his beloved cabin in the mountains, a jolt of something akin to excitement, something she hadn't felt in years, ran through her. Her mother scoffed quietly. A cabin in the mountains? What's she going to do with that? But Grace didn't hear her. She was too caught up in the memory of her grandfather, of long summer days spent hiking in the woods, of evenings spent listening to his stories by the crackling fire. The cabin was more than just a property. It was a sanctuary, a place where her grandfather had spent countless hours writing, painting, and simply being, a place where he had connected with nature and with his own soul. He had always been her biggest supporter, her champion, the only person who had truly believed in her, who had seen beyond the expectations and the shoulds, and recognized her true potential. He had always encouraged her to follow her own path, to defy expectations, to live a life filled with passion. He had given her books, art supplies, and endless words of encouragement. He had told her that she could be anything she wanted to be, that she just had to believe in herself. The cabin was his last, whispered instruction, his final act of faith in her. She knew instinctively that it was a key to unlock something within herself, a key to open a door to a life she had long forgotten. As the lawyer droned on about legalities, Grace closed her eyes and imagined herself at the cabin, surrounded by the towering pines, breathing in the crisp mountain air, feeling the sun on her face. It was a vision of peace, of freedom, of possibility. And for the first time in a long time she felt a flicker of hope. The air was clean, sharp, and intoxicating, a stark contrast to the stale, recycled air of her office and the suffocating atmosphere of her home. The silence was broken only by the rustling of leaves, the distant call of birds, and the gentle murmur of the nearby stream. Away from the city, away from the expectations, away from the noise, Grace felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. The cabin was simple, rustic, filled with her grandfather's spirit. His presence seemed to linger in every corner, in the scent of old books, in the worn armchair by the fireplace, in the paintings that adorned the walls. She spent her days hiking through the woods, exploring hidden trails, marveling at the beauty of the natural world. She rediscovered her love of reading, devouring books she had long ago set aside, immersing herself in stories of adventure, resilience, and self-discovery. She started writing in her journal again, pouring out her thoughts, her feelings, her fears, and her hopes. She spent hours simply sitting on the porch, watching the clouds drift across the sky, listening to the sounds of nature, allowing herself to be present in the moment. It was a time of quiet contemplation, a time of shedding the layers of should, and peeling back to the core of who she truly was. She cooked simple meals in the old wood-burning stove, ate them alone at the kitchen table, savoring each bite. She slept soundly in the small, cozy bedroom, dreaming dreams she couldn't remember upon waking but that left her feeling refreshed and renewed. She felt like she was shedding a skin, releasing years of pent-up tension and anxiety. She was reconnecting with herself, with her passions, with her soul. The mountain was her healer, her sanctuary, her teacher. The fire crackled and hissed, casting dancing shadows on the walls, mirroring the turmoil churning within her. She sat in her grandfather's worn armchair, a glass of wine in her hand, her journal open on her lap. She reread the entries she had written over the past few weeks, her words a raw, honest reflection of her inner landscape. She thought about her marriage, the years of quiet compromise, the unspoken resentments, the growing distance between her and Mark. She thought about their early love, their shared dreams, the promises they had made to each other. Where had it all gone wrong? When had they stopped seeing each other, truly seeing each other? She thought about her career, the endless pursuit of approval, the sacrifices she had made, the dreams she had abandoned. She thought about the long hours, the missed family dinners, the constant pressure to perform, to succeed, to be the best. Was it worth it? Had she sacrificed her happiness for the sake of a career that ultimately left her feeling empty and unfulfilled? She thought about her mother, the constant criticism, the impossible expectations, the feeling that she could never quite measure up. She thought about the ingrained belief that she had to be perfect, that she had to please everyone, that she had to sacrifice her own needs for the sake of others. And she realized, with a clarity that startled her, that she couldn't do it anymore. She couldn't live her life for other people. She had to choose herself. She had to honor her own needs, her own desires, her own dreams. She had to let go of the shoulds and embrace the wants. Tears streamed down her face, tears of grief for the life she had lost, tears of anger at the forces that had shaped her, but also tears of release, of liberation, of hope for the future. It was the beginning of a long, difficult, but ultimately liberating journey. She took her ring off her finger, the diamond sparkling in the firelight. It wasn't a declaration of war, not yet. Just a letting go. A lightning. A silent promise to herself to finally, truly be free. She got up and threw the ring in the fire. Grace walked into Eleanor's office with a mixture of trepidation and resolve. She had made a decision. She was going to quit. She couldn't continue living a life that was slowly suffocating her soul, a life that was draining her of her joy, her passion, her very essence. She had spent weeks at the cabin, reconnecting with herself, rediscovering her dreams, and she knew with unwavering certainty that she couldn't go back to the life she had been living. But before she could speak, before she could even utter the words, "I quit," Eleanor stopped her. "Grace," she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft, her eyes searching. "I know you're unhappy." Grace stared at her in disbelief, her mind reeling. How could she possibly know? Had she seen through her carefully constructed facade? Had she sensed the turmoil brewing within her? Eleanor sighed, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her face, a hint of something human beneath the icy exterior. "I see myself in you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The same potential, the same suppression. She went on to tell Grace about her own struggles, the sacrifices she had made, the loneliness she had endured, the price she had paid for success. She had become a partner, a legend, a force to be reckoned with, yes, but at what cost? She had sacrificed her personal life, her relationships, her passions, her very soul on the altar of ambition. It was a revelation, a seismic shift in Grace's perception of Eleanor Vance. The ruthless boss, the ice queen, the woman she had feared and resented for so long, was actually a woman who understood her, who had been where she was, who wanted to help her find her own path. The thunderstorm outside raged on, mirroring the storm of emotions within Grace. "I wanted to leave," Grace said. "I don't love being a lawyer." Eleanor became her mentor, her confidant, her champion, her unexpected ally in the quest for authenticity. She challenged Grace to step outside her comfort zone, to take risks, to embrace her unique talents, to let go of the fear of failure. She encouraged her to explore her passions, to rediscover her love of writing, to cultivate her creativity. She helped her build her confidence, her voice, her power, not by telling her what to do, but by asking her what she wanted. Eleanor wasn't just teaching her how to be a better lawyer. She was teaching her how to be a better Grace, how to be true to herself, how to honor her own needs and desires. She introduced Grace to powerful women she knew, women who had defied expectations, women who had created their own paths, women who were living lives filled with purpose and passion. She pushed Grace to take on pro bono cases that aligned with her values, cases that allowed her to use her legal skills to make a difference in the world. Eleanor told her that if she wanted to be an attorney, she would become one of the best, that she had the intelligence, the drive, and the compassion to excel in the legal profession. But she also told her that Grace had so much more potential, that she had a gift for words, a talent for storytelling, a voice that needed to be heard. "You could write," Eleanor said one evening, her eyes twinkling with encouragement. "You could change the world with your words." "Change the world," said Grace skeptically. The cabin became her sanctuary once again, her writing studio, her place of refuge, a space where she could be herself, without judgment, without expectation, without fear. She poured her heart onto the page, writing about her experiences, her feelings, her dreams, her fears, her hopes. She wrote about her marriage, the challenges and the joys, the love and the loss. She wrote about her career, the triumphs and the failures, the pressures and the rewards. She wrote about her family, the complexities and the connections, the expectations and the realities. She wrote about her journey of self-discovery, her struggles, her triumphs, her moments of doubt, her moments of clarity. Her words flowed like a river, cleansing, healing, empowering. She experimented with different styles, different genres, different voices. She wrote poetry, short stories, essays, even a scene from a novel she had abandoned years ago. She read her work aloud, listening to the sound of her own voice, learning to trust her instincts, learning to embrace her unique perspective. She discovered a new purpose, a new passion, a new voice. She wasn't just a lawyer anymore. She was a writer, a storyteller. An artist. A woman who was finally, truly expressing herself. Her book, a collection of essays about women's empowerment, self-discovery, and the courage to live authentically, was a bestseller. It had resonated with women all over the world, women who were struggling to find their voices, women who were yearning for something more, women who were ready to break free from the expectations and embrace their true selves. She stood behind a table in a local bookstore signing copies of her book, connecting with readers, sharing her story, listening to theirs. She wasn't just selling books. She was selling hope, inspiration, permission to live authentically. She was offering a lifeline to women who felt lost, alone, and trapped. She looked out at the crowd, her heart filled with gratitude. She had come a long way from the woman trapped in the ticking clock, the woman suffocated by the weight of should. She was finally living a life that was fully, unapologetically hers, a life that was filled with purpose, passion, and joy. "I can't thank you enough," said a woman with tears in her eyes. Visiting her mother was still difficult, a dance of old patterns and ingrained expectations, but it was different now. Grace stood taller, not needing her mother's approval, finding strength and validation within herself. She had learned to set boundaries, to speak her truth, to honor her own needs, even in the face of her mother's criticism. Her mother was still hesitant, still prone to judgment, but there was a new note in her voice, a hint of something akin to admiration. "You seem happy, Grace," she said, her voice softer than Grace remembered. "And that's what matters, isn't it?" The conversation wasn't perfect, the relationship wasn't magically healed, but it was a start. A small step toward understanding, toward acceptance, toward a more authentic connection. And for Grace, that was enough. Looking at the photo of her grandfather, his eyes twinkling with warmth and love, Grace felt a surge of gratitude. He had been her rock, her confidant, her champion, the only person who had truly seen her, who had believed in her, who had encouraged her to follow her own path. He had given her the gift of unconditional love, a gift that had sustained her through the darkest of times. He had taught her the importance of authenticity, the power of kindness, the beauty of nature, and the joy of living a life filled with purpose. She knew that he was watching over her, cheering her on, celebrating her success. She whispered a thank you to the photograph, tears streaming down her face. She knew that she couldn't have done it without him. He was her guiding star, her inspiration, her angel. He was the reason she was finally free. Grace now writes full-time, earning a comfortable living from her books, her essays, and her speaking engagements. She has a devoted following of readers who are inspired by her story, her honesty, and her message of hope. She is an activist, using her voice to advocate for women's rights, mental health awareness, and environmental protection. She is a mentor, guiding other women on their journeys of self-discovery, helping them find their voices, their passions, and their power. She is a wife, a mother, a daughter, a friend, but most importantly, she is herself. She is living a life that is fully, unapologetically hers, a life that is filled with purpose, passion, and joy. She has transformed her pain into power, her struggles into strength, her dreams into reality. She has broken free from the expectations, embraced her authentic self, and created a life that is truly her own. And so there it is. The story of a woman who dared to ask, "Is this all there is?" and then had the courage to answer with a resounding no. A story of transformation, resilience, and the power of authenticity. The bravest thing you can do is to live a life that is fully, unapologetically yours. Let go of who you think you should be and be who you are. What would it look like for you to live a life that is truly yours? Share your reflections in the comments below, and subscribe to the channel for more stories of transformation. Because the world needs your authentic self. Now more than ever. Because someone needs your story.